40,000 years ago, the men who had the most children were not the strongest men in the camp, not even close. And the reason why is something you did today without noticing. Sometime today, you tried to make someone laugh. Maybe it landed, maybe it died. Either way, you thought about it afterwards. A small, stupid thing you'd never call important. It is the oldest mating display your species has. Here's what you think you know about how ancient humans paired off. A big man, a club, a woman dragged backwards into a cave. Strength wins, the strongest breeds, everyone else loses. There is almost no evidence for any of it, and the truth is so much stranger. Because the people who left the most descendants, the ones you are actually, literally descended from, were not the strongest men in the camp. In one hunter-gatherer society that anthropologists studied closely, the men who had the most children were the men who could tell the best stories. So the question pulling you through the next 12 minutes isn't how ancient humans mated. The mechanics haven't changed in 300,000 years. It's who got chosen and why the answer still runs your life today. And near the end, the part nobody says out loud, the person you're descended from may not have been entirely your species. Hold on to that. To find out, we have to go somewhere with no doors. Start with the thing nobody tells you about prehistoric life. There was no privacy. None. Not less than today. None. For almost all of human history, you didn't live in a city or a village. You lived in a band of 20 to 50 people, walking constantly, following food and water. That was your entire universe. You knew their voice in the dark. You knew what they smelled like. And not one of them could be replaced, because if the group turned on you, there was nowhere on Earth to go. And here's what that does to you. 20 to 50 people is not a village. It's a room you can never leave. Which means every glance, every flirtation, every rejection happened in front of everyone you had ever met. No ghosting, no leaving. If you humiliated yourself at midday, you sat at the same fire that night, and every night after for the rest of your life. Sit with that for a second. Imagine trying to make a move while 30 of your relatives sit 6 feet away, cooking roots and openly watching. Which sounds like a nightmare. But it created something we've lost completely, and it's the reason strength stopped mattering. Because when everyone can see everything, you cannot fake anything. Today, someone can meet you as a curated photograph in 3 sentences. They can know your face for weeks before they know your character. Ancient humans had no such gap. They watched you every hour of every day for years. They saw how you behaved when the hunt failed and everyone was hungry, whether you shared meat or hid it, whether you panicked when something moved in the dark. They saw exactly how much of a coward you were in real time for your entire life. In a world like that, reputation isn't part of who you are. Reputation is all of who you are. Which flips the whole caveman story on its head. You couldn't win by being the biggest, because everyone already knew exactly what you were. Being strong and untrustworthy didn't make you attractive. It made you a problem the group had to solve, and groups solve problems permanently. So if muscle wasn't the currency, what was? Anthropologists went looking for the answer, and it turned up somewhere nobody expected. Among the Agda, a hunter-gatherer people in the Philippines, a team led by anthropologist Andrea Miliano found that skilled storytellers were valued more highly than almost anyone else in the group, more than the best hunters. And when they looked at the reproductive data, storytellers weren't just admired. They had more children. Read that again. In a world of predators and starvation and constant physical danger, the trait that got you chosen, the trait that actually made it into the next generation, was the ability to hold a group of exhausted people around a fire and make them feel something. Funny beat strong, and it wasn't close. Which sounds like a joke until you ask why. Why would evolution reward comedy? Because a joke is a test you can't cheat. Being funny means modeling another mind, knowing what they expect, then breaking it at the right moment. Timing, memory, language, empathy, and the nerve to fail in public. You can fake generosity for a day. Bravery once. You cannot fake making 30 tired people laugh night after night for 20 years. So laughter became a signal, not of joy, of intelligence, a test that runs itself in public for free. And there was one place it ran every single night. Close your eyes and stand there. It's dark. Not the orange half-dark you know, real dark. A sky so thick with stars it looks solid. The fire is the only light for 100 miles, and it moves, so every face around it keeps changing shape. Wood smoke, animal fat, 30 unwashed people you've known since birth. Something screams out in the black and nobody flinches. That one isn't dangerous, and somebody starts telling a story. Fire made the night safe enough to have hours in it, and hours are what conversation is made of. And that's the first thing that's still in you. When you tried to make someone laugh today, you weren't being social. You were running a 300,000-year-old audition, and some part of your brain knew exactly what was at stake, even if you didn't. But being chosen assumes someone was doing the choosing, and that's where the caveman story collapses completely. Because in the movies, the man decides. In the evidence, he very much does not. Among the Juhansi of southern Africa, anthropologists recorded something that would have scandalized the Victorians who invented the caveman myth. Women rejected men constantly, openly, without consequence. If she didn't want him, that was the end of it. No mechanism existed to force her. No property, no priest, no contract, no police. And it went further. Divorce was ordinary. If a relationship stopped working, people stopped, and the group absorbed it without drama, no shame, no ruin. You walked to a different fire. Think about what that means. The freest sexual choice in human history may not be now. It may have been 40,000 years ago, before anyone owned anything worth fighting over. If this is already breaking what you thought you knew, subscribe, because the next part stops being about romance and starts being about the strangest bargain in the history of your body. Here's the bargain. Human beings are born broken. A newborn horse stands within hours. A newborn human can't hold up its own head, can't cling, can't crawl, can't do anything but scream and wait, and stays useless for years, a decade before it can survive without you. No other animal makes a deal this bad. So why do we? Because of the head. A big brain won't fit through a human pelvis, so evolution made a horrifying compromise, push the baby out early before it's finished, and let it develop outside. Every human you've ever met was born premature. That's the deal our species took to be smart. Which created a problem out on the grassland, with predators in the grass and no one coming. One exhausted adult cannot carry a screaming, half-finished animal for 10 years and also find enough food to stay alive. It's not hard, it's impossible. Fail, and you both die, written out of the species forever. This is where mating stops being about attraction and becomes about survival. Choosing wrong doesn't just hurt. Pick the partner who walks away and your child dies. That's the stake every flirtation was played for. So evolution solved it, and the solution is the thing you have written poetry about your entire life. Love is not a feeling your species invented. Love is a mechanism. It's biology's answer to a logistics problem. How do you stop two tired, irritable primates walking away from each other while one holds a toddler in the middle of nowhere? You make it hurt to leave. You flood them with attachment chemistry so strong that separation registers as pain. That ache you felt when someone stopped answering? That isn't romance. That's a survival alarm, built to keep a child alive in a world with no mercy for a child alone. But even that wasn't enough. Because here's the part that breaks the whole nuclear family story we tell ourselves. Two parents still couldn't do it. Human mothers never raised children alone. Not once, not anywhere, not in our whole evolutionary history, until incredibly recently. Anthropologists call it cooperative breeding. In most primates, a mother carries her infant and nobody else touches it. In human bands, babies were passed around constantly. Grandmothers, aunts, siblings, cousins, unrelated adults. A child belonged to the camp. We are the ape that requires a village, not metaphorically, structurally. Our entire reproductive strategy assumes a crowd of helpers, and without one, the math simply doesn't work. Which changes what you were choosing. Not a partner, whether the camp would feed your child when you couldn't. Which is why so many modern parents feel like they're failing at something that should be natural. It isn't natural. You're attempting, alone in a quiet house, a job evolution designed for 12 people. And once you see that, one of the strangest facts about the human body suddenly makes sense. Here it is. Human females stop being able to reproduce and then live for decades afterwards. That is almost unheard of in the animal kingdom. Most animals reproduce until they die, so why build a body that switches off its own reproduction and keeps going 30 more years? By every rule of natural selection, she should be invisible now. She should just stop. Unless she's contributing something else. Biologists call it the grandmother hypothesis, argued most forcefully by anthropologist Kristen Hawkes. A grandmother who stops having her own children and helps her daughter raise hers puts more of her genes into the future than if she'd kept going. She isn't raising one fragile infant. She's the reason 3 grandchildren survive. Menopause isn't a shutdown. It's a strategy. And it quietly rewrote what a mate was worth. Because you weren't just choosing a person, you were choosing their mother. Pick someone whose mother was still strong, still there, still willing, and your child's odds jump. Choose badly, and you were on your own with an infant in a world that killed infants. Your ancestors were doing that maths without knowing they were doing it. So are you. Your grandmother exists. The entire life stage exists, because prehistoric childcare was so brutally hard that evolution built a specialist for it. Your species was shaped, in part, by old women who refused to leave. And that reshapes the whole question, because if this is who we are, then who exactly were your ancestors sleeping with? Here's the part I told you to hold on to. For most of the time modern humans existed, we were not the only humans. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans across Asia, different species, different bodies, different faces, walking the same valleys at the same time. And we did not simply outcompete them. We had children with them. And we know it with certainty, because the evidence isn't in the ground, it's in you. If your ancestry is European or Asian, you're carrying Neanderthal DNA right now, in every cell, working in your immune system and your skin. In Tibet, the gene that lets people breathe at extreme altitude appears to have come from Denisovans. A different kind of human handed it to us, and it's still keeping people alive. So when you ask how ancient humans really mated, the honest answer is stranger than any caveman cartoon. They mated across the species line. You are not the pure descendant of one kind of human. You are a hybrid. The other humans didn't vanish. Some became us. So who got chosen? Not the strongest. He was a liability, and everyone saw exactly what he was every day, with nowhere to hide it. Not the best looking. There were no mirrors, no way to be beautiful at a distance to a stranger. The ones who got chosen were the ones the group wanted to keep, who shared when it cost them, who went to the crying child, and who could take a cold, frightened, hungry group sitting in the dark and make them laugh. That's not a nice idea. That's the reproductive data. Those are the people you're made of. And here's how we know it was real, not inferred, known. Because they buried each other. Ancient humans dug graves, hard, slow work with no tools worth the name, and laid their dead in them on purpose, deliberately positioned. Sometimes with objects beside them, beads, tools, ochre. Things that took weeks to make, never used again, left in the ground with somebody who couldn't use them. In some graves, two people were laid together, turned to face each other. Sit with what that means. Someone knelt in the dirt, tens of thousands of years before writing, before farming, before anything we'd call history, and could not bring themselves to walk away from a body. So they arranged it. They gave it things. They turned two people towards each other and covered them over. They loved. Not a poetic version of it, the real thing, the one that makes you stupid and wrecked and unable to be sensible about someone already gone. Nobody knows their names, nobody ever will, but somebody stayed long enough to put them like that. Which brings us back to you and to something you did today without thinking about it for a second. You tried to make someone laugh. You did it in a room with doors and locks and 100 ways to disappear, for someone who could delete you this afternoon and never see you again. None of the conditions that built the instinct still apply. You did it anyway, because it isn't a choice. It's the oldest audition your species runs, and you've never once been able to switch it off. Every time you tell a story slightly better than it happened, every time you time a pause for effect, every time you lie awake replaying whether the joke landed, you're doing what a hunter-gatherer did 40,000 years ago at a fire in the dark with everything on the line. The clubs and the caves and the dragging were never real. Somebody made them up. What was real is that being funny and being kind is what got your ancestors chosen, every single one of them, all the way back. So the next time a joke of yours dies in a silent room, and you feel that small hot flash of shame, that is an embarrassment. It's 300,000 years of your bloodline, still